Hey everyone, tonight we dive into the peculiar slow-motion decline of Henry VIII, the formidable Tudor figure whose existence was marked by marriages, conflicts, and some rather dubious choices involving axes. Before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly appreciate the content I create here. I'd love to hear from you in the comments about where you're joining us from and what time it is for you. It's always intriguing to see our global audience come together now. Lower the lights, perhaps switch on a fan for a gentle background noise, and let's smoothly transition into tonight's experience together. During the peak of his rule, Henry VIII was the shining star of Renaissance England, statuesque, well-built, sporty, and undeniably a captivating sight in form-fitting attire. As time passed into his later years, one might easily confuse him for a well-adorned armchair that had developed a tendency for irritation. By the 1540s, Henry had entered what historians tactfully refer to as his downturn. He had gained significant weight, primarily around his midsection, and was facing a troubling mix of health issues that included chronic leg ulcers, gout, and the overall consequences of an unhealthy diet, which was on the verge of being restricted. His shift from prince to pudding was so striking it could inspire its own epic tale, complete with rich gravy. This was more than mere royal excess. Henry was experiencing a significant amount of discomfort. Every joint was in pain. His ulcerated legs pulsed with discomfort and emitted an odor that would be unfit for even the most rustic of medieval inns. He struggled to climb stairs, ride a horse, or even walk without assistance. His once magnificent codpiece now primarily acted as a shield separating him from the world around him, and still, the portrayal of the magnificent ruler needed to be upheld. Portraits continued to portray him as strong and robust, with eyes that conveyed a sense of divine mission, rather than the weariness of someone who has been seated for so long that their armor has melded with the chair. His tailors found it challenging to keep pace. According to one report, his final suit of armor needed a waist measurement of 54 inches, and that's quite generous. Behind the glamour and opulence, he was decaying, gradually, openly, and with a significant expense. Courtiers kept their distance, servants hoped to escape foot duty, and his doctors experimented with various treatments, from lancing to poultice. Yet most solutions yielded the same outcome: costly linen drenched in royal ooze at the end of his life. Henry VIII's most notable characteristic wasn't his beard, codpiece, or even his history of marriages. It was his legs, or more specifically, the condition they had come to be in. What started as slight injuries from a jousting mishap in his 30s evolved into a situation that can only be characterized as a nightmare of royal proportions. His legs were afflicted by persistent ulcers, deep, troubling wounds that showed no signs of healing and continuously oozed fluid. Picture attempting to govern a realm while perched atop a couple of troublesome inflamed burdens. That was Henry's routine. The sores were not only painful, they had become the stuff of legends. Guests remarked on the aroma wafting from a distance. Ambassadors feared court audiences, not due to politics, but because they wished to avoid being near his ankles. Legend has it that the ulcers were so severe you could glimpse the bone beneath. The term ooze appears frequently in correspondence from that era. If Shakespeare had delved into the realm of body horror, this would surely be the opening act. Of course, the finest medical experts of the 16th century were consulted, which essentially meant they applied herbs and crossed their fingers for a miracle. Treatments involved poultices crafted from honey, rose oil, and other ingredients that seemed somewhat acceptable in a traditional sense. They also attempted cauterization, indeed, sealing the wounds with heat, which Henry found quite unpleasant, as one might expect. And then came the piercing. The piercing, a nightly routine of soothing the mind and body with gentle care and comfort. Picture yourself as a doctor who greets each day with a cheerful "Good morning, Your Majesty. I'm here to poke your legs once more." Many court doctors likely faced early deaths, possibly due to the stress they endured. The ulcers severely hindered Henry's ability to exercise, and when paired with his notoriously rich diet, this led to a cycle of deterioration. Increased weight resulted in heightened pressure on the injuries. Increased pressure resulted in heightened discomfort. Increased discomfort led to heightened emotional fluctuations, and more mood swings likely indicated that someone close by was about to face dismissal, banishment, or even worse, a second marriage. If you've ever been curious about the consequences of a man attempting to consume his way to holiness or escape from the real world, then Henry VIII's daily menu is the perfect example. His meals were more than just abundant, they were nearly turned into tools of aggression. Breakfast might consist of multiple eggs, generous portions of beef, white bread drenched in ale, and perhaps a roasted partridge to kickstart the digestion. Fruits and vegetables, only if they served as decoration or happened to land on the roast by chance. The Tudor court associated meat with strength and virility. The greater the abundance on your plate, the more glorious your reign. And Henry, bless his heart, embraced that as a personal quest. Roasted swan, venison, lamb, eel pies, game birds, all enveloped in rich gravy, sauce, or deeper significance. If it ever had a heartbeat, he consumed it. If it didn't serve its purpose, it was likely utilized to enhance something that did. What does he enjoy treating himself to? Crimson elixir, a vast amount of it. Every day. Water was meant for the common folk and for cleansing injuries, not for royalty. By the end, his body was probably 60% Cabernet. Now, let's discuss portion size. His meals were crafted in vast amounts, not solely for himself, but for a whole royal entourage of taste testers, servers, musicians, and whichever group had his favor that week. But even with the company around him, Henry devoured his meals as if each bite could be his last. Reveal eventually there was one. This diet, rich in fats and low in vegetables, had its consequences on well-being. In addition to the notorious ulcers, his digestion was often unpredictable. Royal physicians frequently observed his bloating, discomfort, and, shall we say, noticeable distress. One might find it amusing to synchronize a pocket watch with the resonant groans that follow his lavish meals, reverberating through Whitehall. Yet, despite everything, Henry remained steadfast in his ways. In the later years of his rule, he struggled to chew with his decaying teeth, yet he remained adamant about having large servings. At banquets, the food needed to be pre-cut to ensure he wouldn't exhaust himself. Even picking up a turkey leg felt like a workout. Every indulgent ruler eventually faces the moment when gravity takes its toll. For Henry VIII, that moment came in his mid-40s, though it was anything but gentle. It came accompanied by a cacophony of discomfort, including gout, obesity, and ever more bothersome ulcers. At that point, Henry had become so substantial and unmovable that managing his body necessitated careful organization. The splendid era of jousting tournaments and grand displays of athleticism at court has faded away. Getting him out of bed now required several attendants, pulleys, and a touch of emotional persuasion. He was less of a walker and more of a being in motion. Royal engineers are said to have crafted a mechanical chair, a blend of a sturdy wheelchair and a throne on training wheels, to facilitate his movement throughout his palaces. His armor was tailored not for combat, but to accommodate the impressive stature of royal grandeur. One might have misplaced a courtier within the folds of his sleeve. Getting on a horse, let it go. They needed to construct a hoist system, indeed, a true crane for royalty, solely to elevate him into the saddle, and even then the horse probably reconsidered its life decisions. Exercise, once seen as a virtue, had transformed into a legend. His sole way of moving was to twist around and shout at someone, and even that took considerable effort. His doctors recommended gentle movement, such as taking a few steps each day. But Henry favored political executions instead of any form of physical activity. It may have burned fewer calories, but it truly uplifted spirits. This physical decline was not only bothersome, but it also posed serious risks. Lack of movement intensified all his issues, affecting his circulation, his mood, and his already troubled digestive system. As a ruler, your well-being is a concern for all. Whole days were planned based on the distance he could be moved. Court ceremonies were also required to be brief. State functions were designed to ensure the king remained comfortably in his seat for an extended period. If the throne room had featured a treadmill, it would have served merely as a symbol or been utilized to turn a spit roast. Yet no one had the courage to voice the truth, that the most influential man in England was, in a very real sense, burdened by his own decisions. Among the many challenges that come with the decline of royalty, few are as unforgettable or as hard to overlook as odor. In his later years, Henry VIII was said to have an unmistakable scent that would precede his presence. Body odor was quite common in Tudor England. In an era where cleanliness was more of an idea than a routine, fragrances were viewed as a means of wellness, and the best way to avoid unpleasant odors was simply to keep your distance. Even by the standards of the 16th century, Henry's fragrance was truly exceptional. The source of the issue: his notorious leg ulcers. These were not merely small injuries, they were deep, rotting infections, perpetually oozing, concealed beneath layers of silk stockings and denial. The esteemed doctors did all they could: sweet dressings, soothing herbal wraps, and gentle lancing. However, there are limits to what can be done when the king's legs seem ready to assert their own freedom. The outcome was a persistent, sharp odor that lingered in the palace hallways. Courtiers were known to gracefully withdraw during discussions. Ambassadors allegedly navigated meetings with perfumed cloths pressed to their faces, akin to a Renaissance version of strategic assistance. And then there was the issue of his overall cleanliness, with movement almost unfeasible and pain ever present. Regular bathing became a thing of the past. Instead, Henry depended on powders, oils, and multiple layers of luxurious fabrics crafted to conceal his discomfort. He wrapped himself in layers of velvet and linen, wishing to conceal the decay that lay beneath. Surprise, they caught on. Even his own garments were given up. It is said that his clothes needed to be incinerated after use, rather than laundered, a poignant symbol of how much of his dignity had become expendable. Even with everything happening, everyone remained silent in his presence. If you even slightly frowned in the wrong way, you could end up being sent to the Tower of London, or even worse, given the job of changing his bandages. Indeed, that was a real position. Though their names remain unknown, we should all take a moment to honor their contributions. being a monarch comes with its own set of challenges. It's even more challenging when you're dealing with persistent discomfort, leaking from various places, and gradually becoming one with your own furniture. By the end of his reign, Henry VIII was not only physically restricted, but also emotionally unpredictable. In one moment, he was mourning the loss of his beloved wife, Jane Seymour. The following moment, he was blaming someone for treason for merely blinking too loudly. His court existed in a perpetual cycle of emotional turmoil. Servants became adept at deciphering the angle of his eyebrows, much like sailors gauge the sky. For impending storms, he appears to be unhappy. That's either a blockage or a battle. Certainly, Henry was not always this way. In his younger days, he exuded charm, brilliance, and a sense of fun. However, as the ulcers worsened, the fluctuations in mood became more pronounced. The former Henry had been succeeded by a more erratic figure, a monarch whose main approach to foreign affairs was fueled by anger. Medical historians believe that in addition to his physical issues, he might have experienced untreated depression, irritability from chronic pain, and potentially head trauma from a jousting accident in 1536. In 16th century England, the common remedies for feeling down included prayer, leeches, or pointing fingers at the French. Sadly, holding the crown meant he was never advised to rest. Instead, the advisors exchanged anxious smiles and nodded in agreement with everything he mentioned. Some even lauded his seemingly divine wrath, which is a polite way of expressing, "We'd prefer to safeguard our necks. Thank you very much." The outcomes were chaotic. A multitude of courtiers faced exile, imprisonment, or execution merely for losing favor during one of Henry's tempestuous moods. Even his longtime friend and chancellor, Thomas More, wasn't exempt, illustrating that Henry's inner circle resembled a constantly changing lineup. By January of 1547, it was clear to everyone in the royal court that the end was near, except for Henry VIII, who was, in every sense, deteriorating. However, it wasn't permissible to state that, under Tudor law, foreseeing the king's demise was considered treason, leading royal physicians to become the most nervous, overqualified performers in history. Henry found himself resting in bed, not merely confined to bed, but truly embracing it. He had not taken a step in weeks, had not mounted a horse in years, and spent his last days governing England from a pile of ornate cushions and dubious choices. His legs were puffy, his breathing was heavy, and his appetite was diminished, at least by Tudor standards. He continued to eat as if he were unaware that his will was on the verge of becoming the most significant document in the nation. Even in his clear condition, no one had the courage to speak the word dying. Courtiers crafted an extensive vocabulary of gentle expressions. He is enjoying a profound rest. His Majesty is in a contemplative state. The king is energetically processing his meal. Even his doctors approach the topic with caution. A physician is said to have proclaimed, "His Majesty will heal, if it is God's will." A cautious declaration, ambiguous, indecisive, and supported by a higher power. Meanwhile, said Majesty was floating in and out of awareness, likely dreaming of roast goose and Protestant diplomacy. Yet, even as he faced his decline, Henry VIII remained occupied with unfinished paperwork. He completed the paperwork. He updated his will. He established a regency council for his 9-year-old son, Edward, who was on the verge of inheriting the kingdom along with a debt as vast as France. These were not the grand concluding moments of a dignified leader. They were frantic notes from a deeply troubled individual. While those around him feigned understanding of his fleeting episodes, all those close to him were aware of the reality. Everyone in the palace, from the servants and courtiers to the rats scurrying beneath the floorboards, likely felt a change in the air. Yet, they remained patient, because the monarch of England couldn't pass away until it was appropriate to declare it. At this point, everyone was hesitant to take the initiative as January stretched on. Henry VIII floated in a state that wavered between clarity and regal confusion. His body was giving in, yet his mind was still ready to issue commands, dismiss others, and maintain the facade of a nation where he wasn't visibly fading away. The denial was heavy, perhaps heavier than his ankles. He offered no official admission, no heartfelt goodbye, no dramatic last remarks. Instead, he provided directives, modifications to the will, adjustments to the Regency Council, and the typical anxious reshuffling of influential figures, just in case any of them entertained peculiar thoughts following his eventual and certainly not imminent demise. He successfully completed the succession plan. His frail 9-year-old son, Edward, would ascend to the throne, surrounded by a carefully chosen circle of advisors. These men, it's important to highlight, possessed the loyalty and treachery of a barrel full of Tudor eels. Henry also commanded the completion of his tomb, a magnificent edifice he had envisioned for many years. Just a heads up, it was never completed. Despite his tendency to micromanage and cling to power, what ultimately endured was documents. When it comes to religion, he skillfully maintained a remarkable sense of ambiguity. England maintained a somewhat Protestant identity, but it wasn't overly so. just Protestant enough to ruffle feathers in Rome without fully embracing any doctrines. It was like quietly expressing discontent and swiftly moving on. Even in his last moments, Henry would not accept how near the conclusion truly was. When priests inquired if he wanted to reconcile with God, he sidestepped them like someone evading jury duty. One account indicates he ultimately murmured, "Everything is gone." Yet, even at that moment, the court remained uncertain whether he was referring to his soul, the kingdom, or merely a wayward turkey leg. Meanwhile, the palace maintained a firm policy of silence regarding his declining health. Anyone caught using terms like last rites or funeral preparations faced immediate removal, not out of disrespect, but to maintain the facade that England's mighty monarch wasn't fading away in his own bed. In the rich tapestry of royal intrigue, one might anticipate Henry VIII to offer a poignant deathbed revelation, a theatrical soliloquy reflecting on his transgressions, remorse, and the 6 wives he either wed, eliminated, or lost along the way. Instead, we experienced tranquility, or even more frustrating, a lack of clear organization. There were priests at his bedside indeed, but they served more as decoration than anything else. Henry, who had completely transformed the Church of England merely to annul a marriage and explore theology on his own terms, suddenly became very reserved regarding his spiritual matters. No intense request for pardon, no sincere remorse. "No, I apologize for that entire conversation about beheading your mother with his daughter, Mary." Maybe he believed there was nothing to reveal. Ultimately, this was a man who felt that divine approval accompanied each of his choices, regardless of how complicated they became. From his perspective, he believed he hadn't compromised his principles. He had often been persistently misinterpreted by those with rigid beliefs and partners displaying overly protective tendencies. A report indicates that Archbishop Thomas Cranmer arrived just in time to inquire whether the king still had faith in Christ. Henry VIII, on the brink of awareness, reportedly tightened his grip, a sign that invites various interpretations. Could it have been affirmation? Could it have been a muscle spasm? Was he just irritated that the archbishop forgot to bring wine? That squeeze was the nearest he ever came to a final revelation. For a man fixated on order, it's revealing that his last moments were consumed not by contemplation but by documents, assigning tasks and ambiguous allusions to the divine. While other kings passed away in regret, Henry departed while redistributing. Once, he had referred to himself as the ultimate authority on earth for the Church of England. But now he confronted death with nothing more than a simple nod and a slight twitch of his hand. It seems that divine authority overlooked the need for an exit interview. Yet perhaps that was the most fitting way for Henry to depart. No regrets, no sorrowful figures, just the gradual, unwavering downfall of a man who consistently favored the resonance of his own rules over the whisper of his moral compass. Thus departed Henry VIII, without any grand last words, no lyrical farewell, and certainly no sign that he believed anything was amiss. When Henry VIII finally passed away on January 28, 1547, the atmosphere didn't shift into grief or formal declarations. It hesitated for a moment, lingered in an uncomfortable silence, then began to feel a sense of unease. Here's the situation. Under Tudor law, it was against the law to announce the king's death without explicit permission. To imply that the monarch had passed away, even if he was clearly deceased, was considered treason. This meant that everyone present suddenly found themselves very invested in the act of pretending that Henry VIII was merely taking a deep and possibly eternal rest. Doctors, courtiers, and clergymen exchanged glances, each one hoping the other would make the first move. Not a single person did. There was no announcement, no collective sorrow, no fanfare. Just the profound quiet of individuals contemplating, well, what comes next. In the end, they decided to remain silent for a few days, not out of respect, but as a calculated move. Succession required careful handling. The council gathered, and most crucially, the 9-year-old heir Edward was made aware that he now held ownership of all in England, along with a few rather displeased neighbors. During this period, Henry VII's body stayed in Whitehall Palace, still a king by title, yet now more a figure of aspiration than of biological presence. Ministers discreetly managed his matters while feigning his continued unavailability, which wasn't entirely false, merely a remarkable understatement. And although the word dead was never uttered, the palace staff commenced their preparations with all the finesse of a Shakespearean comedy. Quietly, mourning attire was arranged, seals were modified, and some opportunists likely began revisiting family trees to establish their distant connection to the young king. Believing they were entitled to land, even foreign ambassadors were not informed immediately. Diplomats from France and the Holy Roman Empire continued their discussions with courtiers who wore strained smiles, trying to mask the subtle odor of decay that lingered in the air, seeping through the luxurious velvet drapes. The whole country was under the guidance of a man who, according to the law, was technically still alive, albeit in an unusually silent state, not in motion, and soon to require an exceptionally large coffin. Once Henry VIII was officially, though not immediately, deceased, the royal handlers encountered a fresh and pressing challenge: how to care for the body. Sadly, the body had its own agenda, primarily focused on the process of decay. To put it frankly, the man was massive. He tipped the scales at over 300 pounds, and not in a sleek, balanced way, but rather in a soft, indulgent pudding form. His body was plagued by infections, ulcers, and the consequences of years of indulgent Tudor feasting. It started to deteriorate more quickly than anticipated, much more quickly. In the cool corridors of Whitehall Palace, attendants and embalmers hurried to maintain the king's condition. However, this was not the peak era of refrigeration. Embalming techniques were basic, involving the filling of the body with spices and encasing it in layers of fabric, resembling a regal lasagna. The aspiration was that the aroma of cinnamon and cloves would mask the unpleasant smell of decay. Surprise, they did not. Even with all attempts, the body started to give way, initially in small amounts, then increasingly concerning. A blend of bodily fluids oozed from the coffin, leading to unease, bewilderment, and ultimately a wave of queasiness. It became so severe that during the funeral procession to Windsor, the coffin allegedly released a dark stain and an odor so strong that it shocked the attendees and, in one well-known story, drew the attention of stray dogs. Absolutely, dogs. Consuming the remnants from the former leader of the Church of England, likely not the way he envisioned his legacy being celebrated. To add to the discomfort, the coffin had been sealed in a rush. The importance of royal demands overshadowed the quality of workmanship. It expanded due to internal gases and, reportedly, fractured. It certainly wasn't the Tudor equivalent of Tupperware. All participants made an effort to maintain their composure. Grieving nobles strolled alongside the seeping coffin, maintaining an air of composure as if they were oblivious to the odor, and not a single soul mentioned it in their discussions later on. It's rare for the remains of a royal to capture attention so long after their passing, especially due to unexpected issues. However, Henry VIII was always one to make a grand statement, both in life and in his final moments. As the funeral procession advanced toward Windsor Castle, the sealed wooden coffin bearing the late king rolled forward with a heavy presence. One might assume that moving the remains of England's most legendary monarch would require a respectful, elegant vessel, or at the very least, something that doesn't resemble a spoiled meat container. Yet, time and nature teamed up to ensure this last journey was memorable, but not in a good way. The coffin started to seep, not in a figurative sense, but in a very real way. Despite attempts to preserve the body, the mix of heat, internal gases inadequate, a ceiling, and significant weight led to the coffin perspiring. And by sweat, we mean a gentle flow. Modern storytellers recounted dark, foul liquid seeping from the bottom of a coffin during a pause at Sion Abbey, a vivid detail that lingers in your mind long after. Even if you wish it wouldn't, it continues to decline. There's a widely shared, though perhaps unverified, story that dogs were observed licking the liquid found beneath the coffin. Picture this: a grand procession comes to a standstill, enveloped in a heavy silence, with grieving nobles clad in dark attire. As a pair of eager hounds take advantage of the moment to indulge in what is unmistakably the king. Tudor England featured numerous rituals, yet the consumption of dogs was not intended to be included in state funerals. Still, silence reigned supreme. The performance must continue. The coffin was tidied up quietly, and everyone continued on their way, gazes straight ahead, lips sealed and noses wrinkled in distaste. This wasn't merely an awkward incident. It transformed into a tale of lore, a shadowy fable shared in hushed tones across the ages. For some, it felt like a just consequence for Henry's harshness. For some, it was a dark joke reflecting a life filled with indulgence. In any case, Henry VIII succeeded in achieving something that very few rulers can boast of. He disrupted a funeral solely by being there. There's a fascinatingly ironic twist to the fate of Henry VIII, not among the illustrious kings in Westminster Abbey nor in a grand mausoleum of Tudor marble. No, the man who separated from the Catholic Church, who disbanded monasteries, and who proclaimed himself the supreme leader of the Church of England, was laid to rest in a modest vault beneath the floor of St. George's Chapel, almost as if it were an afterthought. He found himself beside his genuine affection, Jane Seymour, the only spouse who blessed him with a son and passed away before she had the chance to let him down. And that's all there is to it. No grand structure, no lavish resting place, merely a flat surface that, for more than 100 years, didn't even carry his name. It was during the Victorian era that an inscription was first added. Until then, Henry VIII lay in quiet obscurity, mere feet below the bustling tourists and grand royal ceremonies above. Here rests the man who once roared through Europe with papal bulls in one hand and a turkey leg in the other, the individual who severed the heads of 2 spouses, dismantled ages of religious customs, and altered the spiritual landscape of England, now rests like a somewhat prosperous trader. The irony is profound, and yet strangely fitting. After all the splendor, the influence, the rituals, and the political outbursts, it seems almost appropriate that Henry's ultimate resting place was quietly modest, even by chance, no magnificent burial site created while alive, no intricate statue, no grand shrine to his honor. Merely a lead-lined box resting beneath a chapel floor, a dwindling recollection alongside Jane and, in time, Charles I, whose demise was, to put it mildly, quite dramatic. Despite his ambition to leave a lasting mark on history, Henry VIII found himself in a simple grave, lacking in adornment and surrounded by constant visitors. Valeria Messalina didn't merely find her way into the limelight, she emerged from it, radiating brilliance. A member of the influential Claudian dynasty, she possessed royal lineage flowing within her. Her great-uncle held the title of Emperor Tiberius, and her cousin was destined to rise as Emperor Nero. In essence, Messalina came from a lineage where political maneuvering overshadowed family gatherings, and treachery was as prevalent as the air they breathed. She grew up in a Roman society characterized by opulence, deceit, and intense political maneuvering. It was a setting where goodness was celebrated openly but cast aside behind closed doors. From the beginning, Messalina would have grasped the intricacies of this perilous game. Devotion held great value, looks mattered immensely, and a strategically placed relationship or partnership could determine one's rise or fall. In her teenage years, she was wed to her cousin Tiberius Claudius Drusus, who is more famously recognized in history as Emperor Claudius. During that period, Claudius was regarded as an unexpected choice for a political role. Clumsy, physically challenged, and seen as a benign intellectual, hardly anyone believed he would ascend to the throne. However, authority in Rome had a peculiar tendency to fall into unforeseen hands. When Claudius unexpectedly ascended to the throne amid the turmoil after Caligula's assassination, Messalina, still in her 20s, quickly embraced her position as Empress of Rome, showing no hesitation in adapting to her new role. Almost instantly she started transforming her persona, not merely as a decorative spouse, but as a powerful presence to be acknowledged. Behind her youthful beauty and public charm lay a keen intellect, already plotting ways to strengthen her. Standing. Rome anticipated its empress to embody elegance and humility. Messalina, in contrast, harbored aspirations that were far from humble. She refused to be just the support for someone else. She aimed to be the one in control, employing charm, seduction, partnerships, and intimidation to ascend further. In a setting where everyone concealed their truths, she effortlessly navigated the realm of hidden whispers, within the empire's opulent corridors, where whispers spread more swiftly than any courier. Valeria Messalina was on the verge of transforming into both a celebrated figure and a warning for the ages. Rome had encountered driven women in the past, but none quite like her. Upon being crowned empress, Valeria Messalina quickly emerged as one of the most powerful women in Rome, not solely due to her title but because of the way she wielded it. She actively engaged beside Claudius in the imperial court. She was the one softly guiding him, influencing choices, orchestrating unions, building connections, and removing threats, all while feigning the role of the devoted spouse. However, her impact extended beyond the realm of politics. Messalina was notorious for a different reason altogether. Her rumored insatiable desires. Historical accounts, primarily authored by men with their own agendas, depict her as the most wicked seductress of Rome. Tacitus and Juvenal all vividly recounted how she allegedly slipped out of the palace at night to blend in at brothels, mingling with prostitutes and making her way back before dawn. Regardless of the truth behind these stories, one thing stands out. Clearly, Messalina's reputation stood apart from any other empress, both in her time and in history. Every rumor had a plan behind it. Her partners weren't always selected for enjoyment. A great number were influential figures, senators, horsemen, and heirs of nobility. Messalina wielded closeness as others wielded incentives. Share a bed with her and you could discover new opportunities awaiting you. Cross her and you may discover yourself facing unexpected consequences, or something even more daunting. Claudius, on the other hand, seemed either delightfully oblivious or intentionally uninformed. His rule was marked by numerous distractions, administrative changes, political conflicts, and his own doubts as a ruler who was often overlooked. Certain historians propose that Messalina influenced Claudius by adopting the persona of the naive spouse, caring, loyal, and safeguarding. Some believe he just preferred to remain unaware. Ultimately, the reality would have broken the facade of authority he believed he held over his court and his marriage. Yet Rome was aware. The murmurs in the discussions, the laughter in the gathering places, the sly remarks from competing nobles. Messalina's adventures were the stuff of legend. Despite her name being linked to indulgence and desire, she maintained a firm hold on authority. The paradox, both shocking and invulnerable, heightened her allure and threat. She merged allure with strategy, transforming her physique into a tool and her sleeping quarters into a battleground. Rome's elite either dreaded her presence or were captivated by her charm, at times experiencing both emotions simultaneously. Yet, like any unrestrained force, the barriers would eventually falter. As Messalina ascended, the foundation of the empire beneath her grew increasingly precarious. Messalina's time as empress was marked by more than just controversy. It was truly an exemplary display of skillful influence. She grasped the intricacies of Roman politics deeply and navigated it with astonishing skill. Her targets didn't always include those she was romantically involved with. Frequently, it appeared as threats, rivals, critics, or anyone who had the audacity to contest her status as the imperial queenmaker. And she was relentless. One of her preferred strategies was the misleading allegation. With Claudius frequently unfocused or indifferent, Messalina had the ability to engineer the ruin of anyone by merely uttering a carefully timed falsehood. She charged influential senators with collusion, wives with infidelity, and noblewomen with disrespect. Numerous individuals faced exile, execution, or were driven to end their own lives, their offense causing disruption. She had support in her endeavors. Messalina was surrounded by supporters, unscrupulous freedmen, spies, and flattering magistrates who were indebted to her influence. These associates facilitated her eliminations, exploited the weak, and guaranteed that her adversaries were vanquished before they had a chance to respond. Claudius, the aloof leader, frequently authorized their executions without recognizing that he was eliminating devoted individuals, those who could. We have alerted him to the impending turmoil approaching his realm. Her most infamous manipulation, however, struck at the heart of personal matters. Claudius was in his 50s when he married Messalina, who was in her early 20s. The difference in age fostered a power imbalance that was susceptible to misuse. She skillfully used her youth, charm, and beauty to uphold an illusion of unwavering domestic loyalty. Claudius, recognized for his public displays of affection, was convinced he had a loyal partner by his side. Yet in secret, Messalina wielded that trust like a hidden weapon, striking from the shadows. She further solidified her standing by giving birth to Claudius' son, Britannicus, that transformed her into not only the empress but also the nurturing mother of the imperial heir. It was an impressive barrier, one that deterred even the most daring of Claudius' advisors from uttering any negative words about her, who would be bold enough to offend the mother of Rome's future. Yet the web she crafted was becoming more constricting. Her list of adversaries was expanding. Even her allies, indulging in the riches of the empire, began to murmur about her impulsiveness. A system founded on manipulation and intimidation is destined to implode eventually. Messalina remained oblivious, or perhaps chose to ignore, the fact that her realm of secrets was starting to decay from the inside, and the individuals she had overlooked on her journey to the top. They remained still, serene, and composed. In the fierce arena of Roman authority, no queen remains unopposed for too long. Messalina faced many adversaries, yet one of the most formidable challenges to her power came not from a plotting senator or a resentful noblewoman, but from a freedwoman named Narcissus. He had company. Narcissus, once a slave, and now a trusted secretary to Claudius, held significant sway in the background. He oversaw imperial correspondence, regulated access to the emperor, and most significantly, had Claudius' attention in ways that few others could achieve. For years, Narcissus endured Messalina's antics, possibly even benefiting from them. However, in time, he too started to recognize the threat she represented, not only to the emperor's standing but also to the overall stability of the empire. Tensions escalated dramatically as Messalina's ambition started to take a more aggressive form. She grew restless with merely pulling strings from the shadows and began to devise a bolder plan, aiming to usurp Claudius completely. Certain accounts suggest that Messalina initiated a relationship with the attractive Senator Gaius Caelus, portraying him not merely as another lover, but as a strategic ally in a discreet power play. Caelus possessed great wealth, held significant influence, and enjoyed a perilously high level of popularity. Messalina sought more than just his presence in her bed. She aimed to see him crowned as ruler. Ancient historian Tacitus noted that Messalina took the bold step of marrying Caelus in a public ceremony, all while Claudius remained emperor, a decision that could be seen as either brilliant or foolish, based on her confidence in the outcome of her plan. It was the most daring political move she had ever made, yet it was also the one that would shatter her. Narcissus was taken aback when he discovered the news of the marriage. He recognized Claudius as someone who took his time, yet even he could not overlook a betrayal of this magnitude. Narcissus faced a choice. He could either report it and potentially be overlooked, or he could seize control of the situation himself. He opted for the second option. Narcissus moved swiftly and quietly to set a clever trap. He collected proof, notified the Praetorian Guard, and built a case so compelling that even Claudius couldn't ignore it. The royal court was on the brink of collapse. The empress, who had governed through secrets, desire, and deception, had at last committed an error too significant to hide, and now the blades she once wielded against others were being honed for her own use. The adversary was back, and this time he was determined to claim her throne. For years, Claudius had been overlooked, not only by Rome but also by his wife, perceived as fragile, studious, and easily swayed. He was the ideal partner for a cunning empress such as Messalina. However, the magnitude of betrayal, with claims of a marriage to another man, was simply too significant to overlook, even for Claudius. When Narcissus finally approached the emperor with the troubling news, Claudius' first response was one of shock. His cherished wife, the mother of his child, had taken another husband. During the bright hours of the day, Narcissus kept it to himself. He demonstrated it to him. Files, observers, the event in question. The emperor was taken aback, and ultimately, enraged. This was no longer mere chatter among the courtiers, this was a betrayal. Claudius, once perceived as lacking the sharpness for leadership, demonstrated an unexpected clarity in his actions. With Narcissus leading the way, he granted emergency powers to the freedman and directed him to tidy things up. The Praetorian Guard. The elite soldiers of Rome were called upon not to protect Messalina, but to bring about her downfall. As Claudius, he made his way back to the palace, quiet and ashen. Narcissus hurried along with purpose. Gaius Silius, interrupted during his festivities, was pulled into the street and met with execution, devoid of any trial. His allies, those who had provided support for the coup or had merely been privy to too much information, were systematically captured and removed in a harsh purge of political cleansing. Regarding Messalina, she did not flee. She was open and unmasked her V. In a peculiar, almost heartbreaking turn of events, she held on to the hope, right until the very end, that Claudius would show her mercy, that her allure, her grace, her position as the mother of his successor would rescue her yet again. She even ran to the gardens of Lucullus, pleading for an opportunity to talk to him, to clarify her thoughts. However, Claudius had stopped paying attention. The man she had once controlled had finally freed himself. Initially, Claudius was reluctant to command her demise. Even with all that was happening, he appeared to be conflicted. However, Narcissus, concerned that Claudius could hesitate, took the initiative. He dispatched a centurion armed with a dagger and a note: embrace a peaceful end, or face the turmoil of public judgment. Messalina, unusually immobilized by dread, attempted to delay. She grasped the dagger, yet found herself unable to wield it. Ultimately, it was the centurion who had to take action on her behalf. The empress who once ruled Rome through allure and quietude met her end in a garden, solitary, anxious, and devoid of strength. And just like that, the most notorious woman in imperial history vanished. Following Messalina's demise, the imperial court was enveloped in a chilling, tense stillness. It was more than merely the conclusion of a controversy. It marked the end of a significant chapter. Claudius, maintaining a calm exterior, commanded that her name be removed from all official documents. Statues were removed. The inscriptions were damaged. Records referencing her actions were discreetly eliminated or altered. Rome was told to let go of its empress. But how can one move on from a woman like Messalina? The city sighed softly in her absence. Whispers of her last moments spread rapidly. Some said she wept for Claudius to rescue her until her final moments. Some claimed she placed a curse on him, standing her ground until the very last moment. Regardless, her memory lingered far more stubbornly than her portraits ever could. The efforts to restore order in the political landscape persisted. Silas and his followers were merely the start. Claudius, now wary of those around him, started to cleanse his court with a sense of unease. Those who had shared meals with Messalina, including freedmen and officials, faced dismissal, imprisonment, or execution. The Senate, keen to demonstrate their allegiance, approved resolutions condemning her betrayal, labeling it a blemish on the empire that had now been justly purified. Just one individual stayed unaffected. Britannicus, the young son of Messalina, stands as the rightful heir to the throne. Claudius found it impossible to hold the boy accountable for his mother's wrongdoings. However, Messalina's demise created a void of power, and every aspiring noblewoman in Rome took note. In the shadows, influential families started strategizing to install a new ruler in place of the deposed empress. Claudius, feeling deeply unsettled and lost in his political landscape, found himself in a state of heightened vulnerability. This wasn't a time for recovery. It was a refreshing restart, a precarious, unsettling tranquility. Claudius's faith in those close to him had crumbled, leading him to depend more on his freedmen, particularly Narcissus, whose power had grown to the point where he effectively governed on Claudius's behalf. Rome, in the meantime, started to revise its beloved nighttime tale. Messalina is often recalled not merely as an unfaithful empress. She turned into a warning story, a symbol of feminine desire and betrayal. Her story, distorted and amplified, grew stronger in death than it ever was in life. She had been erased from the imperial story, yet remained vivid in the Roman mind. Though her body lay hidden from the world, her spirit would remain in the dim corners of Palatine Hill, spoken of in hushed tones, met with laughter and trepidation, for all time. Following Messalina's execution, Claudius faced a challenging situation. An emperor lacking an empress, a father with a fragile heir, and a court teeming with ambitious opportunists. The empire required a fresh matron, an individual capable of bringing stability to the palace and overseeing the imperial household. However, Claudius, still hurt by the betrayal, hesitated to enter into another marriage. Here comes Agrippina the Younger. She embodied all that Messalina was, and even beyond. Elegant, clever, strategic, and formidable in her own way. However, in contrast to Messalina, Agrippina displayed a sense of caution. She was systematic. She came from the Julio-Claudian dynasty, being the daughter of Germanicus, the sister of Caligula, and the mother of Lucius Domitius Barbus, who would later be known as Nero. Agrippina recognized her opportunity. She strategized for the future. Where Messalina had captivated Agrippina, she persuaded Claudius that uniting with her would bring honor back to the imperial family. She vowed allegiance, harmony, and, above all, a cohesive empire. Claudius, growing older and more influenced by those around him, ultimately consented. Their marriage, despite the controversy surrounding their family ties, was legitimized through a special decree from the Senate. She ascended to become the next empress of Rome. However, this was far from a tale of romance. Agrippina had no desire to share the throne. She sought to take charge, swiftly eliminating any remaining supporters of Messalina, making certain that the former empress's name remained hidden. Along with her son Britannicus's right to the throne, she placed her own allies in important positions, distanced Claudius from his former advisors, and started preparing her son Nero to become the next emperor. One by one, she unraveled Messalina's legacy, not merely through politics, but by reshaping the narrative of memory. What about the people of Rome? They observed, intrigued. Some murmured that Agrippina was merely Messalina with a more polished image. Some believed she posed a threat far beyond what they could imagine. Whereas Messalina governed with fervor and spontaneity, Agrippina led with strategy and meticulousness. While Messalina had pushed her luck too far, Agrippina kept her cards close to her chest until the moment had passed. The empire exchanged one empress for another, yet it remained uncertain if Rome had truly grasped its lesson. Claudius had endured the machinations of one cunning wife. He wouldn't make it through the next. Thus the spirit of Messalina lingered, honor transformed, emerging anew in the aspirations of a woman rising from her own ashes. Following Messalina's demise, her son Britannicus emerged as a sorrowful remnant of a forsaken lineage. Even as the biological son of Claudius and the legitimate heir to the throne, his future now teetered on the edge of uncertainty. He was just a child when his mother was taken from him, and in an instant, the palace that once rejoiced in his arrival transformed into a beautiful prison. At first, Claudius kept Britannicus nearby, even providing him with reliable tutors and protectors. The emperor remained determined to establish a lasting legacy through his descendants. However, that optimism was subtly and effectively undermined by Agrippina the Younger, who was determined to prevent Messalina's offspring from ascending to the imperial throne. Agrippina's son, Nero, was older than Britannicus and much easier for her to manage. Thus she initiated her efforts to eliminate Britannicus from the line of succession. She depicted him as childish, easily swayed, and unqualified to lead. Simultaneously, she devoted herself wholeheartedly to uplifting Nero. She arranged for his adoption by Claudius, bestowing upon him the name Nero Claudius Caesar Drusus Germanicus, along with titles that indicated his destined rise to power. As Britannicus entered his teenage years, he had lost his status as Rome's favored child. He found himself confined within the walls of his own home, under constant surveillance, while his allies were either forced into exile or rendered mute. Even his previous mentors were substituted with Agrippina's allies, guaranteeing that the young prince was raised amidst a network of political doubt and solitude. Claudius, growing older and more easily influenced, appeared to distance himself more from his son. He showered Nero with accolades and slowly separated himself from the union by eliminating their offspring. Britannicus emerged as a representation of lost potential, a rightful successor overshadowed by the machinations of power, and he was aware of this reality. Ancient sources describe him as becoming resentful, anxious, and vigilant. He might have recalled his mother's accident, and maybe even dreaded experiencing a similar outcome. Following the enigmatic death of Claudius, who was likely poisoned possibly at the hands of Agrippina, Nero ascended to the throne without any resistance. Britannicus, now in his teenage years, had become merely a source of concern. A year later, at a banquet, the boy unexpectedly fell and passed away. What's the official reason? Seizure disorder. What's the true reason? According to most ancient sources, poison was given on Nero's orders. Messalina's legacy faded along with her son, and the imperial lineage she fought so hard to protect was snuffed out, not through conflict, but by a simple meal. Valeria Messalina may have met her end in shame, yet her tale continues to resonate. Through time and truth, the harder the empire attempted to erase her, the more eternal she grew. Throughout the ages, she evolved from a living empress into a legend, embodying Rome's quintessential representation of feminine vice, desire, and treachery. Was that reputation truly deserved or simply fabricated? The remaining narratives of Messalina's life primarily originate from adversarial sources, including Tacitus, Suetonius, and Juvenal, individuals who held little regard for women in positions of authority, particularly those who chose to assert their independence. To them, she was not seen as a significant figure in the political arena. She was a warning, a formidable figure who manipulated her allure and tainted the integrity of the empire. They spoke of her supposed late-night excursions, 2 brothels, her public union with another man, and her countless romantic entanglements. However, these stories seem to reflect a sense of moral alarm rather than solid proof. Certain contemporary historians have started to doubt if the notorious reputation of Messalina was exaggerated to fit a particular story. Ultimately, influential women in Rome, particularly those who lost their standing, were frequently recast as villains. Imagine Cleopatra, consider Agrippina. In a world dominated by men, an ambitious woman was seen as either a model of integrity or a temptress hiding her true intentions. Messalina, quite fittingly, took on that role. Even when we remove the embellishments, a single truth persists. She wielded significant power in the Roman court. She navigated through a terrain, overcame opponents, ensured her son's rightful place on the throne, and exercised subtle influence in a realm ruled by men with weapons and counsels. Through her skillful tactics, allure, or intimidation, she achieved her goals with remarkable success. Her downfall signified more than just the conclusion of her personal narrative. It transformed the course of Roman succession, cleared the path for Agrippina, and ultimately facilitated Nero's ascent to power. Her ambitions' echoes reached far beyond her years. In literature, art, and popular culture, Messalina emerged as an archetype, embodying the lascivious empress, the femme fatale, and the very essence of scandal. Yet beneath the myth, there might have been a woman ensnared in a system that penalized authority in the wrong grasp. Particularly when those hands were polished and feminine, Messalina not only shocked an empire but also compelled it to face its anxieties regarding women, authority, and the price of power. And that, more than any relationship, was her most perilous inheritance. Among America's founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton shines as a remarkable intellect, the creator of the nation's financial framework, a co-writer of the Federalist Papers, and a man whose aspirations were boundless. Yet beneath the elaborate wigs and eloquent speeches lay a man whose personal life unraveled into a chaos so remarkable that it marked the nation's inaugural political sex scandal. The journey started in 1791. Hamilton was at the height of his political influence, holding the position of the first Secretary of the Treasury under President George Washington. Yet as he managed the national debt during the day, his nights descended into a more troubling realm. One evening, a young woman named Maria Reynolds showed up at his Philadelphia home, stating that her husband had left her and pleading for financial assistance. Hamilton consented to help, and shortly thereafter embarked on a year-long romance with her. The situation transcended personal boundaries and evolved into a matter of political significance. Maria's husband, James Reynolds, uncovered the affair and recognized a chance. Rather than facing Hamilton with anger, he opted for manipulation. For more than a year, Hamilton provided Reynolds with hush money to keep the affair hidden. However, hidden truths in politics resemble fissures in a barrier. Ultimately, they explode. In 1797, political adversaries, particularly the Jeffersonian Republicans, became aware of the scandal. Whispers started to circulate that Hamilton was not merely involved in infidelity, but also entangled in financial misconduct. What does that mean? He had improperly utilized government funds to settle with the Reynolds couple. The accusation had the potential to ruin a career. Hamilton took a bold step that no one expected. He composed a 95-page confession called the Reynolds Pamphlet, revealing every scandalous detail of the affair with startling, unapologetic clarity. He admitted to his involvement with Maria, acknowledged compensating her husband, and recognized his ethical shortcomings, while maintaining that he had never taken anything from the Treasury. The aftermath was harsh. The Federalists were appalled. His standing took a nosedive, and his adversaries reveled in the situation. Hamilton faced significant public and political embarrassment, resulting in a substantial decline in his influence within Washington's inner circle. And yet, in true Hamilton style, he faced the challenge head-on. He prefers to be recalled as someone who strayed rather than as a criminal. It was a risk that maintained his principles, albeit at the expense of his self-respect. Ultimately, it wasn't a confrontation or a discussion that first revealed the vulnerabilities of America's most daring founding father. It involved desire, manipulation, and an exceptionally thorough brochure. Thomas Jefferson is frequently depicted as the visionary behind America's Declaration of Independence, the philosopher who advocated for freedom, democracy, and the quest for happiness. Yet, beneath the elegant neoclassical design of Monticello lay a reality that Jefferson never openly recognized, a hidden lineage forged through struggle. Sally Hemings was a woman who was enslaved at Jefferson's estate. She was additionally the half-sister of his late wife, the offspring of a white slave owner and a biracial woman who was enslaved. Historians certainly recognized that ironic twist, thus it becoming even more complex. Hemings was just about 14 years old when Jefferson, in his 40s, probably started his relationship with her during his time in Paris for diplomatic duties. For many years, this connection was regarded as mere speculation. However, the oral history, shared by Hemings's descendants, reveals a contrasting narrative, filled with closeness, hidden truths, and offspring. DNA testing carried out in the late 1990s ultimately validated what many had long believed. Jefferson had at least 6 children, with Hemings, 4 of whom reached adulthood. Jefferson did not grant freedom to Sally Hemings. Nevertheless, he discreetly granted freedom to all of her remaining children. They were the sole individuals he liberated from bondage throughout his life. A few of them fled, in a manner that seemed oddly synchronized and went unnoticed. Others were formally freed in his will. Each of them moved into liberation, bearing an uncanny resemblance to their father. Even with abundant proof, Jefferson's supporters consistently portrayed him as a figure of ethical certainty. However, the revelation of his hidden family shattered the illusion. How could the same individual who proclaimed that all men are created equal also support and benefit from a system that stripped away fundamental human dignity? To add to the challenge, Jefferson maintained detailed records. He recorded Hemings's pregnancies in his plantation logs, and her children consistently appeared during his visits to Monticello. However, what is lacking is the recognition. He consistently denied the relationship, refrained from mentioning their names in public, and avoided confronting the obvious disparity between his political stance and his personal life. Sally Hemings, for her part, did not leave behind any writings. Her voice has been shaped by the perspectives of those who viewed her as an object to be owned. The glimpses we have of her character are reflected in the strength of her children, who forged their paths as independent Americans. Within the depths of Jefferson's enlightened vision existed a concealed family, cloaked in secrecy, shaped by quietude, and compelled to bear both his legacy and his weight. Benjamin Franklin was a printer, inventor, diplomat, and philosopher, a man of unparalleled curiosity and cleverness. Yet, beneath the lightning rods and bifocals, Franklin possessed a more enigmatic aspect, one brimming with clandestine societies, for a provocative literature, and a social life that would have left many Puritans in shock. Let's begin with the Hellfire Club. Although opinions vary on the extent of Franklin's engagement, he dedicated several years in England at the peak of its fame. The Hellfire Club was a clandestine group celebrated for its indulgence, humor, and disregard for religious norms. What do they stand for? Follow your desires. It was more about extravagant gatherings and less about dark rituals, where distinguished individuals congregated in secretive locations to indulge in drinks, games, and a variety of stimulating experiences. Franklin experienced numerous connections like that. During his time in Paris as the U.S. ambassador, he developed a well-known appreciation for French salons, where intellectual discussions frequently intertwined with playful banter. French women cherished him, and he cherished their presence. Correspondence shows he was familiar with romantic escapades, even in his later years. He once confessed that more mature women were superior partners, famously stating, "They don't shout, they don't gossip, and they're incredibly appreciative." Indeed, the very individual whose visage graces the $100 bill is the author of that. Franklin also possessed secret codes and aliases. He often wrote under pseudonyms, such as Mrs. Silence Doggett, Polly Baker, and Richard Saunders, crafting entire fictional identities to delve into sensitive subjects like religion, sexuality, and hypocrisy. His writing critiqued authority and revealed moral inconsistencies, while also suggesting his profound curiosity in libertine philosophy and unconventional ideas. Next came his connections with others. Despite being married to Deborah Reed, Franklin spent a significant amount of time in Europe. Away from her. His letters show a lack of loyalty and an abundance of affection for other women. Some historians even suggest that he might have had children overseas, although no claims have ever been verified. It's evident that Franklin was a person fueled by desire, both in thought and in other pursuits. He was free from the strict moral constraints of his Puritan forebears. He appeared to derive enjoyment from pushing boundaries, especially regarding intimacy, authority, and ideas. While textbooks might depict a wise inventor flying kites, the true Franklin was much more dynamic, filled with intrigue, playful antics, and moments of late-night inspiration. George Washington is frequently envisioned as a timeless figure, like a marble statue of a man, calm, brave, and remarkably composed. Yet, behind the powdered wig and military stance lay a profoundly private person, grappling with his own contradictions, insecurities, and repressed feelings. Let's begin with a fact that many are unaware of. Washington was never especially enthusiastic about taking the lead. Prior to taking on the role of Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, he voiced uncertainties regarding his own abilities. He felt a deep concern that he lacked the necessary experience or skill to effectively lead a war against the British Empire. Even after he agreed, he declined a salary, opting instead for reimbursement of expenses, perhaps to maintain an image free from ambition. He faced challenges with his appearance. Washington was preoccupied with the opinions of others. He eliminated a significant portion of his personal correspondence, especially letters that could potentially damage his reputation. This encompassed possibly affectionate letters to Sally Fairfax, the spouse of a friend of his. Long before Martha, it appears that Sally captured Washington's early affections. His letters convey a profound emotional bond, rich with lyrical yearning and controlled desire. Martha's marriage was steady and warm, yet it lacked the conventional spark of romance. The two seldom exchanged personal letters. and the ones that remain exhibit a formal, nearly transactional tone. Martha obliterated almost all of their personal letters following his passing, hinting at feelings or hidden truths she preferred to keep from the annals of history. Then there was the issue of Washington's temperament. Although he was recognized for his calm exterior, his personal aides noted instances of fierce anger, particularly when situations in battle did not go well. He once threw his hat to the ground and swore so intensely that the soldiers were left in stunned silence. These weren't public displays, but they uncovered the emotional strain he endured while maintaining a serene, composed facade. Washington possessed numerous enslaved individuals, a reality frequently overlooked in nationalistic narratives. While he publicly expressed unease about slavery and ultimately granted freedom to some in his will, he continued to gain from coerced labor during his lifetime. He skillfully navigated Pennsylvania's gradual abolition laws by strategically moving enslaved workers out of state to avoid their legal freedom. The nation's founder grappled with private uncertainties, personal regrets, and ethical dilemmas. His greatness was undeniable, yet his secrets were equally tangible. And within that complexity resides the very essence of humanity that history frequently overlooks. Among the founding fathers, John Adams likely possessed the keenest wit and the most compassionate spirit. He was brilliant, contentious, and at times unbearable. Yet beneath his stern New England facade lay a man whose deepest truths were expressed through the written word, rather than through conversation, and his wife Abigail was the one who received the most of those secrets. Their letters provide a deeply personal glimpse into the political landscape of early America, as well as a marriage that was remarkably progressive for its era. In contrast, two other founders who vanished for years or kept their personal lives shrouded in silence. John and Abigail maintained a steady stream of correspondence with one another. More than 1,100 letters remain intact. In them, Adams expressed his frustrations, fears, political thoughts, and profound affection. During John's time in Philadelphia or Europe, Abigail took on the role of his advisor, providing more than just emotional support. He consistently sought her insights on economic issues, international relations, and the actions of other revolutionaries. She in turn urged him to consider the women, a call for legal rights that was remarkably progressive for its era. However, Adams also exhibited a tendency towards paranoia. He felt a profound uncertainty regarding his significance in history. He felt a deep frustration over the level of recognition that Washington and Franklin garnered, worrying that he might fade into obscurity or be eclipsed by their prominence. Following his presidency, he observed with resentment as Jefferson emerged as the beloved figure of the nation, while he slipped into obscurity, his correspondence from retirement overflowing with jealousy, frustration, and a yearning for acknowledgement. He was known for having a notoriously challenging demeanor. Adams had little patience for foolishness, and he viewed many in government as lacking wisdom. He clashed with Hamilton, held suspicions about Jefferson, and found himself distanced from almost every significant political group at various times. His single term as president was filled with disputes, notably the Alien and Sedition Acts, which restricted press freedom and civil dissent. Despite his imperfections, Adams always maintained his sense of right and wrong. He stood out among the founding fathers for his principled decision to refuse slave ownership, even at the cost of political unpopularity and economic disadvantage. His steadfast, unwavering integrity may not have captured the spotlight, but it truly characterized who he was. John Adams lacked refinement and adoration, yet he was strikingly candid in his writings, his policies, and his fervor. In those late-night letters to Abigail, he crafted a legacy that was deeply human rather than merely heroic. James Madison, recognized as the father of the Constitution, is frequently celebrated as the understated intellect behind the American Revolution. Yet beneath his unassuming height and gentle tone lay a man grappling with not just political turmoil, but also his own deteriorating health and profound self-doubt. Standing just over 5 feet tall and weighing under 100 pounds, Madison had a delicate physique throughout much of his life. He dealt with ongoing health issues, potentially epilepsy, which he tried to conceal as much as possible. Friends and political allies frequently remarked on his pale complexion and the unexpected periods during which he would vanish from the public eye to regain his strength. He carried the constant worry that he might collapse from exhaustion or anxiety. Madison was so convinced of his impending demise that he never took the time to pen a memoir. He never thought he would survive long enough to make a difference, but it was significant to him. Madison was the mastermind behind the Constitution and a key contributor to the Federalist Papers. However, he seldom accepted recognition. He chose to operate in the background, allowing more vocal figures, such as Hamilton and Jefferson, to shine in the limelight. He was the subtle architect in the shadows, designing intricate frameworks of governance while others clamored in the spotlight. His union with Dolly Madison offers significant insights into his personal life. Dolly embodied qualities that were the complete opposite of James: vibrant, engaging, captivating. Their union was a strategic partnership. She transformed Madison into a figure embraced by the public, organizing unforgettable political gatherings in Washington, D.C., where rivals found common ground. frequently enjoying her renowned ice cream and cakes. As Madison plotted behind closed doors, Dolly expertly handled the public image, transforming their home into the heart of social life in the capital. Still, Madison carried his burdens. He was a complicated slaveholder, feeling conflicted about the system, yet reluctant to liberate his own enslaved workers. He even engaged in hidden communications about the logistics of slavery in the New Republic, where his thoughts, while intellectually careful, hardly questioned the system. As time went on, Madison faced challenges with feelings of sadness and loneliness. His political influence diminished, and he observed as his ideals of a restrained government were distorted by the very powers he had once empowered. While he might not have possessed Franklin's charisma or Washington's majesty, Madison's brilliance fundamentally influenced the framework of the American Republic. Despite his remarkable intellect, he spent his life troubled by uncertainties, health issues, and the anxiety that he might be forgotten by history. He constructed the platform. Others accepted the honor. Thomas Paine was the passionate voice that fueled America's revolution. His pamphlet Common Sense ignited the flame that propelled colonists toward independence. However, in contrast to the other founding fathers, Paine found himself in political exile, overlooked and scorned by the very nation he played a crucial role in establishing. Paine came from humble beginnings, lacking wealth or privilege. He was an Englishman from the working class who reached America at the age of 37, bringing with him little more than a letter of recommendation from Benjamin Franklin. However, in 1776, his writing transformed everything. Common Sense achieved remarkable success, selling over 100,000 copies, a staggering figure for that era. It was expressed clearly and simply, making it easy for everyone to grasp. It didn't merely advocate for freedom, it insisted on this, mocking monarchy and advocating for the belief that governance should prioritize the needs of the populace. However, Paine's passionate drive for change extended beyond the borders of America. Following the U.S. independence, he journeyed to France and initially backed the French Revolution. In that place he crafted the rights of man, advocating for revolution in the face of oppression. It turned him into a foe of the British Crown and a champion for French radicals. However, when the uprising became violent, Paine was appalled. He was against the execution of King Louis XVI, which branded him a traitor in the perspective of France's new regime. He found himself confined in Paris, narrowly dodging the guillotine, due to a twist of fate, the chalk mark that inadvertently saved his life. Meanwhile, in America, Paine's standing was deteriorating. His subsequent significant piece, The Age of Reason, critiqued organized religion and challenged the authority of the Bible. Despite his assertions of faith, his book was labeled as heretical disbelief. Once close companions betrayed him. Washington, who overlooked his correspondence, the Federalists criticized him as a threat. When he came back to the U.S. in 1802, Paine was an outcast. The individual who once sparked a movement now faced ridicule in the press, was stripped of voting rights in certain states, and was excluded from respectable circles. He passed away in 1809, destitute and solitary, laid to rest on a modest farm. In New York, just 6 individuals were present at his funeral. Paine's principles played a crucial role in the formation of a nation. Yet his unwavering integrity, unwillingness to yield, and critiques of faith led to the loss of all he held. Diodot he ignited the spark, only to be singed by the fire. Although many of the founding fathers are known for their serious images and formal addresses, Gouverneur Morris embodied a more flamboyant persona, reminiscent of a dashing figure from a provocative 18th-century tale. He is the individual who truly penned the final version of the U.S., the foundational document, featuring the renowned opening lines, "We the people." However, his personal life is far from conventional. Maurice exuded charm, vibrancy, and a delightful sense of extravagance. He strolled with a cane following the loss of his leg in an enigmatic carriage mishap. Yet rumors circulated that it was more connected to leaping from a jealous spouse's window than any honorable misfortune. Morris didn't allow it to hinder his progress. Indeed, the wooden leg turned into a distinctive hallmark. Yet another element that set him apart in the conventional realm of powdered wigs and strict decorum. During his time as a diplomat in France amidst the Revolution, Morris gained a reputation for his romantic escapades. He engaged in relationships with French aristocrats while turmoil swept through the streets of Paris. One lover found themselves ensnared in the same revolutionary upheaval that claimed Queen Marie Antoinette. Another allegedly assisted him in evading a mob assault. However, Morris was more than just a libertine. He was a true iconoclast. He boldly condemned slavery, labeling it a wicked institution. While numerous individuals of his time remained silent or benefited from it, he even declined to endorse the Constitution unless it safeguarded the federal government's authority regarding slavery, a request that ultimately became diluted. Back home, Morris kept the energy high. He chose not to marry until later in life, instead indulging in a series of mistresses and provocative romances that left his colleagues feeling uneasy. At 57, he surprised high society by marrying his housekeeper, Anne Carey Randolph, who was already at the center of a significant scandal involving claims of abortion and accusations of infanticide. The media had a heyday. But Morris was unfazed. He had grown accustomed to feeling like the outsider. His passing was quite extraordinary. As the story goes, Maurice tried to address a urinary blockage by inserting a whalebone into his urethra, resulting in severe internal harm that ultimately proved fatal. Regardless of its truth, it aligns perfectly with the pattern. Morris embraced life and its end in his own unique way, frequently leaving those around him in awe. In a chamber brimming with powdered wigs and lofty ideals, Gouverneur Morris stood out as a one-legged, sharp-tongued maverick, making him one of the most intriguing personalities you may not be familiar with. The Founding Fathers established a new nation with principles that vowed liberty, justice, and equality, yet their personal lives frequently clashed with the very freedoms they fervently advocated. As the legends of American greatness expanded, so did the deliberate overlooking of their inconsistencies. Slavery represented a profound contradiction. A significant number of those who proclaimed that all men are created equal either owned slaves, benefited from slavery, or actively supported it. Jefferson, Washington, Madison, Monroe, all owned slaves, while discussions of independence took place. Enslaved individuals worked tirelessly on plantations, denied the rights that the Constitution would eventually guarantee. Some individuals, such as Franklin and Hamilton, made efforts toward ending slavery, yet none truly dismantled the system that enabled their society to thrive. Women were an overlooked aspect. Abigail Adams famously encouraged her husband to keep the women in mind. As the laws of the new republic were being crafted, he certainly did not. Not a single one did. The Constitution did not include women at all. The founders expressed deep affection for their wives and daughters in their private letters, yet, in the eyes of the law, those women were stripped of rights, lacking a vote and a voice. Next came the ethical inconsistencies, intrigues, hidden offspring, clandestine organizations, and hushed controversies permeated their personal affairs. Still, they penned reflections on integrity, nobility, and self-control. They criticized oppression in other countries while maintaining disparities within their own borders. They were wary of monarchy yet permitted the rise of dynastic wealth and inherited power in their newly established republic. Some recognized the inconsistencies. Washington struggled with the issue of slavery. During his later years, Madison extensively discussed the perils of factionalism, all the while ironically constructing the very political party system he cautioned against. Some individuals, such as Jefferson, appeared to have the ability to separate different aspects of their lives completely, crafting inspiring philosophical writings in the morning and overseeing enslaved laborers by the afternoon. However, these imperfections do not to diminish their impact, they enhance their humanity. The Founding Fathers were not deities draped in togas. They were exceptional, driven, imperfect individuals, harboring personal vulnerabilities alongside their outward beliefs. They constructed a foundation on contradictions, many of which continue to linger in America today. Their legacies are not carved in stone but are vibrant discussions that continue to resonate. Debates surrounding liberty, authority, ethics, and the narrative of history. In their hidden narratives, woven with intrigue, conflict, and concession, we uncover not only the roots of a nation but also the framework of its lasting challenges. Napoleon Bonaparte may have commanded empires and directed historic battles, yet in matters of the heart, he revealed a surprisingly tender side. Behind the tough facade of a military mastermind was a man utterly vulnerable to emotion, particularly regarding Josephine de Beauharnais, his first wife and deepest fixation. Their relationship started with a rush of excitement. Josephine, an enchanting widow 6 years older, utterly mesmerized the young general. Following a short period of romance, they tied the knot in 1796. Shortly after, Napoleon set off for his Italian campaign, leaving his newlywed wife in Paris. From the front lines of war, he started penning letters that showcased not the perspective of a conqueror, but rather that of a lovesick, nearly desperate individual. In one letter he confesses, "I rise enveloped in thoughts of you. Your image and the memories of last night's delightful experiences have granted no peace to my senses." Then another, he begs, "Please don't wash. I'm on my way home." The letters oscillate between allure, longing, and deep vulnerability. Napoleon would triumph in battle and then promptly take a seat to reprimand Josephine for her slow replies. He insisted on receiving letters every day, viewing any lack of communication as a sign of disloyalty. His emotions were so unpredictable that his tone frequently shifted mid-sentence, oscillating between romantic yearning and sharp reproach. Josephine, on the other hand, showed a notable lack of enthusiasm. As Napoleon bared his heart, she reveled in the charm of Parisian salons, and ultimately found her own romantic interests. The news devastated Napoleon, and his letters started to reveal his deep sorrow. Despite uncovering her betrayal, he found it difficult to move on. His letters became increasingly shadowy and consumed by fixation. He described a state of unrest, unable to find peace, overwhelmed. Josephine, for her part, frequently responded with ambiguous niceties or remained quiet. It was a lopsided affair, marked by sorrow, even after their divorce in 1810. which was driven by political motives to marry Maria Louise of Austria. Napoleon continued to hold deep feelings for Josephine. Even in exile, he is said to have kept a portrait of her close by as he rested, and on his deathbed at St. Helena, his final words are believed to have included her name, France, the military leader. Of the military, Josephine, despite all his might, Napoleon was unable to inspire love. His letters stand as more than mere historical records. They are the heartfelt revelations of a man who was not defeated by external foes, but rather by a woman who never reciprocated his love in the way he yearned for. Frida Kahlo didn't merely depict suffering, she expressed it through her words. Her letters to Diego Rivera, the prominent Mexican muralist who was both her greatest love and the cause of her most profound pain, are unfiltered, lyrical, and drenched in heartfelt emotion. While others concealed their sorrow, Frida transformed hers into a powerful expression, both on canvas and on paper. Frida and Diego's relationship was famously tumultuous. He was 2 decades older than her, a charismatic presence known for his She was the passionate young artist with a spine fused by injury and a heart susceptible to explosive emotions. United by intense emotions, they created a powerful connection, yet were torn apart by treachery. Her letters unveil a woman who embraced love with an overwhelming passion. In one, she expresses, "There's nothing that rivals your hands, nothing quite like the green gold of your eyes. My body carries your essence for countless days." And in another, "My affection for you surpasses even my own being." Frida always embraced her suffering. She poured it out, word by word. She referred to Diego as her frog toad, a playful jab that perfectly blended her fondness with a hint of exasperation. Her letters oscillate between deep affection and intense frustration, frequently within the same paragraph. Despite Diego's betrayals, including those with Frida's friends and her sister, she reached out to him not with indifference, but with a deep yearning. Her words invite you to simply be there. "I see chaos in the absurd, yet you offer me serenity, your brilliance, and your comfort." They ended their marriage in 1939. They tied the knot again a year later. Though their connection was often tumultuous, it always held a remarkable strength. Even in their separation, Frida penned her thoughts as though Diego were essential for her very existence, essential, frustrating, and perpetually elusive. Her physical discomfort also seeped into her correspondence. Following her traumatic bus accident, which resulted in enduring pain, Frida portrayed her body as a war zone, one that Diego couldn't rescue, yet somehow managed to make more tolerable. Her vulnerability was complete, yet it was never feeble. Ultimately, Frida Kahlo's letters encompass much more than her relationship with Diego. They explore the conflict between affection and self-discovery, loyalty and existence. Amidst her struggles, she discovered expression. In her yearning, she discovered warmth, and in her passion she etched her legacy into time. Ludwig van Beethoven, the introspective master of classical music, penned some of the most heartfelt letters ever composed. Yet the identity of the woman who sparked his inspiration continues to be one of history's most intriguing romantic enigmas. Referred to as the immortal beloved, she is known solely through a collection of unsent letters discovered among Beethoven's possessions following his passing in 1827. These letters lack a name, a date, or a return address, yet they contain profound, aching expressions of love that continue to perplex and captivate scholars even now. It starts with, "My dear, my everything, my true essence." Another laments, "Even while resting, my mind drifts to you, my eternal love. Embrace tranquility, cherish me, in this moment and the past. What a heartfelt yearning for you, you, my everything. Goodbye. Oh, keep cherishing me. Never underestimate the unwavering devotion of your dear one." Beethoven was not recognized for his emotional expressiveness. His letters to others were frequently brief, stiff, and sometimes unfriendly. Yet within these pages, something breaks apart. He reveals his true self, sharing deep connections, and at moments, is utterly exposed. What's even more unsettling is the urgency woven into every word. He was not composing from a position of ease, but rather from a state of distance. The correspondence implies a separation, possibly restricted from uniting and snared in situations beyond their influence. He discusses challenges, hidden truths, and the barriers that prevent them from coming together openly. For centuries, scholars have engaged in discussions about the identity of this woman. The top contenders consist of Anthony Brentano, a married nobleman, Josephine Brunswick, a widowed countess, and Giulietta Guicciardi, a former student. All had profound ties to Beethoven during various periods of his life, yet none have been definitively verified. The puzzle is still unfinished. It is clear that Beethoven experienced profound love, whether it was a singular moment or numerous times throughout his life. Yet this eternal beloved occupied a unique spot in his heart. She inspired him, challenged him, and represented a hope that fell just out of reach. And then, tranquility. The letters remained unmailed. Maybe he never had the courage, maybe he just wasn't meant to. Maybe she had already departed. For a man who created timeless symphonies, it was his unsent letters, brimming with human longing and unspoken sorrow, that revealed the most delicate melodies of his spirit. His eternal love stays a mystery. Yet through his writing, we sense her presence in every sorrowful note. Oscar Wilde, the renowned humorist of the Victorian age, famous for his clever remarks and lavish writing style, also crafted one of the most poignant love letters in literary history. It lacked sweetness and flirtation. It was a 50,000-word letter of anguish from a man whose affection had shattered him. What is it called? De Profundis, which translates to From the Depths. Wilde composed this work during his time in Reading Jail, where he was serving a 2-year sentence for gross indecency stemming from his romantic involvement with Lord Alfred Douglas, a young aristocrat affectionately referred to as Bosie. Their romantic entanglement had shocked society, infuriated Douglas's influential father, and propelled Wilde from elegant gatherings and fine wine to a confinement cell. The letter starts with sorrow, but soon evolves into something even more distressing. A revelation, a charge, a reflection on affection and pain. He expresses, "You approached me to discover the joy of existence and the joy of creativity. Perhaps I am here to guide you towards a deeper understanding of something truly remarkable, the essence of sorrow and the beauty it holds." Wilde criticizes Douglas for his vanity, selfishness, and abandonment, yet his love for him remains unwavering. That's the struggle. Each section of De Profundis oscillates between resentment and desire, treachery and reverence. This isn't merely a letter of separation, it's a tribute to Wilde's past existence. Wilde holds himself accountable as well, referring to his own indulgence and blindness as critical shortcomings. He contemplates his efforts to shape Bosie into a more profound individual, someone deserving of true commitment. Instead, he was overwhelmed. The connection he acknowledges resulted in his public humiliation, his financial downfall, and the diminishing of his brilliance. However, De Profundis transcends being merely a chronicle of sorrow. It's a profound exploration arising from hardship. Wilde portrays Christ as the supreme creator of sorrow, illustrating how suffering fosters empathy and how incarceration dismantled all the illusions he had constructed. He expresses, in the presence of sorrow, one finds sacred space. Following his release, Wilde sent the letter to Douglas, yet their connection was irreparably damaged. Wilde passed away a few years later, without wealth and in a state of exile. De Profundis was not fully published until both individuals had passed away. While it may not fit the mold of a conventional love letter, it stands out as one of the most brutally sincere expressions ever crafted. It's not about longing, but rather about the sacrifices love demands when it has finished its generosity. Virginia Woolf, the modernist literary giant recognized for her stream of consciousness novels and sharp intellect, possessed a tranquil yet powerful energy beneath her calm facade. During her marriage to Leonard Woolf, a constant and encouraging companion, she experienced a profound and unabashed love for another woman, Vita Sackville West, a fellow writer, aristocrat, and free spirit. Their relationship transcended labels. It was a blend of feelings, thoughts, affection, and occasionally, touch. It started in the 1920s and flourished through a collection of letters that stand as some of the most poetically exquisite declarations of same-sex love in literary history. In one of her initial letters, Woolf expresses, "I have become a mere, an entity that longs for Virginia. Your importance in my life is truly remarkable." The roles frequently changed places. Woolf, typically so reserved, transformed into someone who yearned, desired, and fell apart. Her letters exude a quiet longing, wit, and an underlying sense of urgency. In Vita, she discovered not merely a lover, but a source of inspiration, a representation of liberation and daring femininity that she both admired and longed for. Woolf's remarkable work Orlando drew its inspiration from Vita, a whimsical time traveler who captured the essence of her enigmatic affection. It served as a creative exploration and a heartfelt expression hidden beneath the surface. Vita cherished Virginia, even if her feelings sometimes wandered. She experienced various romances, numerous intrigues, and navigated her own intricate marriage. Her letters to Woolf revealed a profound admiration and a lasting bond. "I find myself missing you even more than I ever thought possible, and I was already ready to feel that absence deeply." Their correspondence stands out due to its unique ability to gracefully navigate traditional norms. These were not proclamations bellowed from high places. These were soft murmurs woven through the pages, personal, secretive, and filled with a yearning that went beyond the tangible. Even after their romantic relationship cooled, they stayed connected, sharing letters until Woolf's tragic passing in 1941. One of her final letters, directed to Leonard, her spouse, is frequently referenced, yet it is her letters to Vita that reveal her deepest happiness. Her openness expressed in written words. In a world that sought to confine love within strict boundaries, Woolf and Vita crafted their own definitions. Their letters encompassed more than just affection. They embodied affection, intricate, stunning, defying categorization, and akin to the ebb and flow of Woolf's writing, perpetually shifting. John Keats, the romantic poet who gifted us with lines such as, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever," experienced a life that was both tragically brief and deeply moving. He passed away at the young age of 25, Yet in his last years, he expressed his deepest feelings in letters to the woman he cherished, Fanny Brown. Their romance was infused with passion, lyrical beauty, and an undercurrent of anxiety. Already afflicted with tuberculosis, was aware that his time was limited. He fell for Fanny deeply and quickly, and even though they were secretly engaged, he understood that he might never have the chance to marry her. The weight of mortality permeates every word he penned for her. One of his letters states, "I have been amazed that individuals could sacrifice their lives as martyrs for their faith. I have recoiled from it. I no longer tremble. I might face great sacrifice for my beliefs. My devotion to love is profound, and I would sacrifice everything for it. I would do anything for you." Keats had a deep affection for Fanny. He adored her. His letters are infused with anguish, elegance, envy, and unwavering commitment. He yearned for her presence so intensely that it caused him physical pain. He referred to her as his divine being, his shining light, and even during times of doubt, he held on to her memory as if it were a source of comfort. However, his condition intensified the urgency of the situation. He worried about being a weight on others. He worried that her love for him might fade, and above all, he dreaded the thought of leaving this world without ever truly understanding her as a devoted partner would. The anxiety, the deep sorrow, renders the letters profoundly delicate. In another letter, he expresses a longing, saying, "I almost wish we were butterflies and lived but 3 summer days. 3 days spent with you bring more joy than 50 ordinary years could ever hold." Fanny cherished his letters throughout her life, even though she seldom mentioned him again. When Keats passed away in Rome in 1821, he was laid to rest beneath a stone that had no name, only an inscription. Here rests an individual whose name was inscribed in the gentle flow of water. Yet his name remained unyielding. His poetry persisted. His letters to Fanny were filled with longing, each page a testament to love's enduring flame, shining brightly even in the face of despair. John Keats may not have had a long life, but he gifted us a love that feels timeless. Emily Dickinson, a captivating figure in American poetry, spent a significant portion of her adult life in solitude, seldom venturing beyond her residence in Amherst, Massachusetts. Yet beneath her withdrawn facade and enigmatic lines lay a profound, fervent emotional landscape, one that revealed itself in letters as intriguing as her poetry. Her most profound letters were directed to a figure she referred to as Master. These 3 letters, unsent and unnamed, unveil a woman grappling with profound affection and deep existential yearning. She expresses, "Master, embrace your existence, fully and welcome me eternally, yet I will always yearn for more than just the absence of fulfillment." The true identity of Master remains unverified. Some think it was Charles Wadsworth, a preacher she looked up to who was married. Some believe it could represent a blend of ideas, a metaphorical partner, or perhaps a reflection of spiritual longing. Regardless of the reality, the letters undeniably convey a deep intimacy, tenderness, and eroticism, filled with a longing that is both profound and restrained. Dickinson also engaged in deeply emotional connections with women, particularly Susan Gilbert Dickinson, her sister-in-law and neighbor. More than 300 letters to Susan remain, brimming with affectionate words, lyrical teasing, and affirmations that intertwine profound camaraderie with romantic feelings. She wrote to Susan, "Susie, will you truly return home next Saturday and be mine once more and kiss me? I wish for you deeply and feel an intense anticipation, sensing that I can no longer wait, that I must have you now." These were not mere notes. They were torrents of emotion, crafted in a flowing, whimsical script. Dickinson chose not to marry, and her emotional experiences largely went unnoticed throughout her life. Yet her letters uncover a person with a profound ability to love, deeply, quietly, and with a touch of poetry. That's not surprising that numerous poems she crafted reflect the emotional depth found in her letters, capturing the longing, the fixation, and the profound fear that comes with closeness. Her words flow like gentle whispers, enveloping affection in soft layers of imagery and pauses. Emily Dickinson resided in seclusion, yet her affection flowed through expansive lyrical phrases. Her letters, fragmented and half-lost, often coded, draw readers into a concealed world of affection that is too intense to be openly expressed. In a world that shunned women's feelings, Dickinson concealed hers within her poetry and prose, perhaps hoping that one day someone would discover them and truly comprehend. Winston Churchill is frequently recalled for his steadfast leadership during wartime, inspiring speeches, an iconic frown. Yet beneath the tough exterior lay a man profoundly committed to his wife, Clementine Hozier, with their bond beautifully captured in an extraordinary collection of love letters that lasted over 50 years. From the instant they crossed paths in 1904, Winston was enchanted. Their romance was short-lived, lasting only for months, and the correspondence started right away. Amidst the chaos of falling bombs and the collapse of empires, Churchill found moments to pen letters to Clementine. His tone, typically intense and commanding in public, became gentle and light-hearted in private. In one letter he penned, "My dearest Clemmy, I trust you will pardon me for sending you such a brief note. Honestly, I'm so occupied managing the British Empire that I hardly have a moment to collect my thoughts." His sense of humor remained intact, even amidst the challenges of World War. Throughout their enduring marriage, Churchill frequently found himself away, engaged in military campaigns, attending Parliament, or leading the nation. Yet his letters arrived regularly, and his fondness appeared unwavering. He referred to her as his cat, and signed letters as Pug, a playful reference to their affectionate nicknames for each other. They wrote not only as partners in marriage but also as enduring friends, trusted confidants, and steadfast sources of support. However, there were times when they were not in sync. In one of her most notable letters from 1940, amidst the turmoil of war, Clementine softly cautioned Winston about his growing irritability with his team. She wrote not to criticize him but to support him in being the leader Britain required. What did he say? Thankful and receptive. He paid attention. Their letters harmoniously intertwined playful charm and calculated intent, warmth and suspense. Churchill once expressed to Clementine that encountering her had taken hold of him more thoroughly than any war front ever could. Even as he approached the end of his life, he kept sending her affectionate notes, usually short but always filled with deep emotion. Amidst the chaos of war rooms and command centers, Churchill discovered his deepest tranquility in the serene act of writing to his wife, simple, sincere, and full of commitment. His legacy might be shaped by speeches and victories, yet the love letters to Clementine revealed that even the toughest figures in history often embrace their gentlest realities in private. A few love stories in literary history shine as brightly or cause as much turmoil as that of Zelda Sayre and F. Scott Fitzgerald. They were the dazzling duo of the jazz age, gliding through the roaring 20s with martinis in hand, chaos looming ahead, and a cascade of love letters following them like confetti from a shattered celebration. Their love story started in 1918, when Scott was a youthful army officer and Zelda was a spirited Southern belle with a penchant for defiance. He wooed her with letters brimming with aspiration, cleverness, and longing. From the very first moment I laid eyes on you, my heart was yours, and that love will remain with me until my final breath. She initially left him in suspense, uncertain whether his aspirations in writing would lead to success. However, when his debut novel, This Side of Paradise, achieved success in 1920, she consented to become his wife. They had wealth, youth, fame, and yet were utterly unready. Their letters convey an intense and passionate affection. In one, Zelda wrote, Scott, my dear, I've just washed my hair and I can't seem to manage it, but my love for you is immense. Her notes are whimsical, lyrical, teasing, and frequently infused with her increasing uncertainty. Scott's responses were filled with affection and a sense of ownership. He appreciated her allure and vivacity, yet was apprehensive about her autonomy. When Zelda attempted to write, dance, or express her creativity, he frequently brushed her off, claiming there could only be one artist in the family. Their letters were infused with a mix of warmth and restraint, creating an intricate web of emotions. As time went on, their once shining lives descended into struggles with alcohol, financial hardship, and growing animosity towards each other. Zelda experienced multiple mental health crises and spent extended periods in treatment facilities. Yet even then, their letters held a peculiar, soothing warmth. From a place of confinement, Zelda once expressed, I've explored countless methods of reaching out to you. I've attempted to express just how deeply I have faith in you. However, the words don't seem to fit. They simply aren't. Scott passed away in 1940, believing he had not succeeded. Zelda tragically lost her life in a fire at the hospital 8 years later. Yet their letters, those fierce, glowing pieces, endure, depict two individuals whose love was like fireworks, vibrant, stunning, and ultimately fated to fail. An affection so vast it transcended their reality, eternally captured in words and remnants.